start.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host today for another edition of VCTV. I think we've got a very exciting and a very fun episode for you ahead today based on what we just went through with pre-show, so stay tuned. But before we get started, like we do on every show, a big shout out and thank you to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making us all come together, making all of this possible, and making VCTV accessible to you all around the world. And thank you to our audience as well. And so today we've got, again, a continuation of episodes that we've been building upon each day here on VCTV. And today we're going to be talking about robots, robotics, manufacturing, industrial IoT, and the industrial 4.0. So what's happening and what's shifting in the world around industry? We talked a little bit about manufacturing, supply chains, and logistics yesterday. We talked about artificial intelligence and automation the day before. Last week, we got deep into edge and IoT, all again, building up to this new world that not only has been building for the past decades, but really has been accelerated and changed over the past 18 months, and even more so over the last 6 globally, whether you're talking about in the United States, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, wherever, this is changing. It's a great opportunity for as investors. It's even a better opportunity for founders. And we're going to dive into all of that and why that's important and why you need to be paying attention to this now. So without further ado, let's introduce our speakers and get to the show today. Welcome back, Ifran. It's a pleasure to have you. Would love a quick introduction for those in our audience who may not know you, and just a little background on how you got into this space. I know you do a ton in IoT, so I'll let you tee that up accordingly.
Thanks, Kyle. Good afternoon, everyone here in the US, and morning and evening to those who are in the Europe and Asia. My name is Irfan, and by background, I'm a systems engineer. So I started my career in robotics, and I worked with this company called Rice Robotics. So that's how I started working in this space, essentially. And then I moved on to the investment side. So I manage a small investment firm, which I personally own, and which is a angel fund where I get hands-on involved in the early stages of the company, but I'm also involved with other institutional funds with various technology applications around the space also. And a pleasure being here at the LA Token conference again. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome, wonderful. Next up, Tanya, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have you. If you could, just a similar introduction, a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kyle. Really great to be speaking to the US since I live in Stockholm, but originally from New York. So I know Sweden's been a topic of probably the world lately. But anyway, so I'm a partner with Butterfly Ventures. I started my career investment banking actually in New York. Started my first fund in 2013, invested that fund across not only the US, but also in the Nordics when I got to move here in 2013. I joined a more local fund called Butterfly Ventures in 2016 to raise their third fund. And Butterfly is the leading Nordic seed entry VC focused on science-based deep tech and hardware. We've invested in almost 84 companies. Our market portfolio cap is about 900 million at this point. And we've just recently fulfilled our full Fund 3. So we have 27 companies in our current fund. We're raising our fourth fund. And it's been really interesting. We're what you consider pre-seed seed investors. So we're typically the first institutional fund or capital that any entrepreneur might see. So we typically invest alongside angels, or in the region here they have state-owned VCs, which is very prevalent. We don't have that in the U.S., so not many people understand what that is. But it's an interesting mechanism to get deep tech actually, and what we're talking about today, with robotics and Industry 4.0, those types of things at an early stage, get those funded. So anyway, so I don't know if that gives you a good idea. We can talk more during the cast and get deeper.
It's perfect. And I'm excited to dive into the Nordics. I had the chance to visit the Nordics recently and also, well, not recently because I mean, we're all virtual. So not too long ago, and I know there's a lot happening in the manufacturing and industrial space that isn't being talked about globally, which is a shame. So I'm excited to hear more. Mohammed, welcome to the show. Excited to have you again. Same to you. Quick introduction and a little background.
Oh, thanks, Kyle. I'm glad to be here amongst esteemed speakers and professionals from around the world. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning for people who are from everywhere, the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, or the Middle East. I'm working right now as GM in Rancher. I've worked before. I started my own ventures before, and I worked across different organizations, governmental as well as private, here in the GCC as well as, of course, in Saudi. And I've been involved in investment as well as raising startups from different levels during the past 3 years.
Wow, excited to have you as well here today. Thank you for joining us and also staying up a little late, which we appreciate. Same with you, Tanya. I just realized about what time it's starting to head on that side of the world. So thank you guys. And Melina, you're on the other side of the coast from me. You're East Coast, I'm West Coast. So we've got a little battle, left side, right side, but welcome to the show. Quick introduction and a little background about yourself.
Hi there. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Mihaela Ulieru. I'm actually, all my background is in dynamical systems and controls, PhD, as well as an academic and a professor and research chair and so on and so forth. So my passion is obviously in the direction of the latest technologies that are revolutionizing manufacturing and robotics. And I've always played, to put it this way, at the forefront of that. Since I had many successful students, they got me out of full-time academia to advise various companies. Like Uber was co-founded by Garrett Camp, which was my graduate student, and actually he stumbled upon from my lab before founding Uber. So currently I am advising what you know as the Sophia robot, but now she is becoming a robot nurse, and I'm going to talk about this more. But of course, I'm not advising Sophia as a robot. She can advise me. She is much better than me at collecting a lot of information and telling me and supporting me. I'm advising the team, and we are now raising funds for this shift in Sophia to deliver her as soon as possible as a nurse, which will not get infected with COVID-19, which can work 24/7 and not make any mistakes when collecting temperature and the other sensors and crunching that data into useful diagnosis, based on which she can also propose the best treatment personalized for the particular person. But about this later. So thank you so much for having me. It's good to see some friends on this show, as well as to make new friends. So I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely, and I'm very excited to unpack that. I just read an article yesterday about the first spinal surgery that was completed in a telepresence AR-based solution. So excited to hear more about Sophia, the former robot, now the nurse or practitioner. This will be exciting after having met her as well in the past. So I'm not sure where to start. I mean, all four of you seem beyond brilliant to what I thought I had good questions for at this point. So I think I'm just going to start in the beginning and kind of what's happening in just the industry, the idea of Industry 4.0. You know, we look back in the past 10 years and Industrial 4.0 was not even talked about up until maybe 5 years ago. 10 years ago, it was just manufacturing. It was just robotics and very boring and very unsexy of a topic. I remember programming my very first robot at the age of 7. It was the coolest thing. It just picked up a block, it dropped it off. That was robots to me. And I think to most of the world, that's kind of how robotics is still a little bit seen. because again, this new era of Industrial 4.0 is just now being highlighted, and it's just now coming to fruition. As investors, it's now a time to start investing versus 5 years ago when the runway was so great for a lot of these projects. So would love to hear from each of you, and we'll start Brady Bunch style. And
just before this, I'd like to start just because of a clarification, because I am also very active member of the World Economic Forum. And as you all know, the Industry 4.0 term has been coined by Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of the World Economic Forum. And he also wrote a book about that, in which he emphasized the convergence of so many technologies. I just, as an academic, I wanted to set these things straight here. And also on that foundation, I proposed the creation of the new Center for the Future Fourth Industrial Revolution of the World Economic Forum, which is now in San Francisco. And I also proposed a few technologies like the blockchain to be added to the top 10 future and emerging technologies at WEF. So thank you very much for allowing me to make this clarification.
Of course, and thank you. I appreciate it. It's something I've paid a lot of attention to, and again, it's something that consumed my life around IoT and just seeing this kind of take shape around the world, whether it was in Europe, it was in Asia, South America, the Middle East, again, Africa as well, even Australia. Everywhere is starting to shift this. Industrial 4.0 has become a global topic, and if anything, probably more important to our lives than we realize. So would love to hear from each of you. Ifran, let's start with you. I know you have a ton of background in this space as well. What is the Industrial 4.0, and how has it changed from what we all may or may not know to what it is today?
Thanks, Kyle. And I think, Dr. Mihaela, was spot on in this case, right? So what are we talking about where Industry 4.0 is going, right? So what we are talking about is convergence of different technology coming into being. And that's what we are talking about, singularity, right? I mean, I think I mentioned in our last session with IoT is the convergence of various technologies is going to lead us to the impact that we want to create in the future, and of course the necessity that we have when it comes in terms of robotics and in terms of Industry 4.0. I think we just saw us getting like a steroid boost because of the pandemic itself. So when you look at specific industries such as manufacturing, which has been largely hit due to the pandemic itself, is verily employing and taking measures of increasing their robot usage in their field of production line. So prior to this, of course, we already had manufacturing robots, assembling robots, but now even when we are talking about supply chain and inventory, that has also increased, specifically because of the situation that we're in. So again, Industry 4.0 is a very broad term, obviously, and to what we assume what it will be and to what it is right now and what we need for the future. And I'm going to reiterate this again, that in order for us to have the bedrock of Industry 4.0 to function effectively, we need to create the infrastructure that's going to support it. And when I say infrastructure, it's not only a technology infrastructure, but in terms of policy, in terms of the way we think, the laws around that, in terms of data privacy, how robots are managed, the ethics and the morals around that are also very important. So I'll just pause right there. I'm sure the rest of the esteemed speaker also have plenty of things to say around this topic.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Tanya, I'd like to come to you next. Mihaela, I'm building up to you, so I see you taking notes, so get ready. It's coming to you last on this one. Tanya, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Because I'm learning. Don't worry, from my co-panelists.
There you go.
So.
And you, our audience, should be learning as well. And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them in real time. If not, we're all going to be available after the show. And unlike a real conference, on social media, you can get a hold of us. So don't fear. Tanya, to you, same question. What is the Industrial 4.0?
Yeah, so we at Butterfly invest quite heavily in the Industry 4.0. And we look at it as kind of 9 technologies, if you will, transforming that revolution. So obviously we've talked about it today, autonomous robots, but also alongside that, simulation, right? Big data and analytics, which we've touched upon a little bit, augmented reality, horizontal and vertical system integrations, IoT for obvious reasons, additive manufacturing, the cloud, and cybersecurity. So these are all, we at Butterfly kind of look at those as the core components or core technologies, that kind of make up the Industry 4.0. And, not all of them, a lot of them will end up, being influential in the autonomous robotic world, as we're seeing in autonomous vehicles today, right? So a lot of computer vision technology. We have a company that we invested in Finland that is currently doing some work with the inside the cockpit, if you will, of the car to watch us. So, being able to, and that technology will also will allow the robots to see what we see. So, really, really interesting stuff. But it's not all, we're, especially in like the COVID situation, somebody mentioned earlier, we have a company out in Norway that does predictive maintenance. But what's really interesting about it is it can be remotely integrated into the factory or the process industry. So like in a dairy or a pulp and paper, do you need as many people to run that in the future? No, because these are the types of AI systems that will be integrated and be able to predict if a major machine is going to go down in 1 day or 10 days, and what do you need to do to fix that? So this is how we kind of look at Industry 4.0.
That's wow. We could have an entire show on all of that. So we're going to continue to make sure we do. Mohammed, to you, how are you seeing Industrial 4.0 and the changes that are happening?
Yeah, right. Of course, the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is from our perspective, from our standpoint right now in terms of time. It is really hard to predict, and that's why when you read Klaus Schwab book, The Industrial Revolution 4.0, you don't find what you might expect while reading about the third Industrial Revolution, which is quite interesting because right now we can anticipate. We can predict what changes would be happening in the world right now, and in one of the chapters that Schwab is talking about the drivers behind the fourth industrial revolutions, which are the mega trends and also digital as well as biological, and some tipping points where he expects that when those points are reached, we might say that yes, we are moving in the right direction of the Industrial 4.0. That being said, right now during the quarantine, I believe, and or the pandemic, it is really pandemic for some industries, but not for others. I mean, some industries are just booming right now as we speak. So that's very interesting, and that's actually turning the investment from other industries that we might think of before as lucrative right now to other industries at the moment, such as logistics or healthcare. So that's my take into 4.0 in this industrial revolution.
So you had everyone's head shaking and in agreement, but one thing I want to point out is I've done this and talked about this industry for over 10 years, and I cannot remember a single time on stage, in conversations, high level, low level, anywhere in the world, that anyone has brought up the Industrial 3.0 or anything prior to 4.0. Instead, it was just the early days of the Industrial Revolution, talking about how we began early Industrial Revolution. That's it. And thank you for doing so, because it's a lost point that I think a lot of people do forget and really tells the story of how we got here. So, Mohammed, big thank you.
Yeah, sure, Kyle. I mean, if we look at the third industrial revolution, it initiated multiple social revolutions as well, and many discussions about the policies and rights of the people. Right now, we are experiencing the rights or data privacy, right? So this, it seems like. We are not stopping at this point, it seems to me. It seems rather that there will be some, I would say, talk about other privacies and other rights that we might taken for granted before.
I absolutely agree. And Mahila, I'm
Absolutely,
going to
and
turn it
thank you
over
so
to
much
you.
again for bringing this up with Industry 3.0, because it's very important to make the distinction here. And from all what my previous speaker remarked, the distinction is clear that, I mean, when Industry 3.0 was the gradual adoption of IT into, streamlining processes and so on and productivity. When we talk about Industry 4.0, we talk about the exponential effects of bringing all of them together at once, all these technologies, the 9 technologies which she mentioned, and applying them. And you know what's happening with exponential effects? If you live in the US, you would have witnessed it, because today I have 5 cases of COVID-19, tomorrow I have 50, the next day I have 50,000, and then here we are immersed in this pandemic suddenly. And that is exponential effects. So when all these technologies are coming together, they don't only get ahead of us and our ability to really grasp what's going on, but they also can accelerate many trends that Industry 3.0 has started, like, for example, productivity, total automation, streamlining cumbersome processes, and all this together simply automating. I remember during my PhD, I worked on a project in Japan on the total automated factory. You can find many videos about that with FANUC automation. So to see the robots who create themselves, so practically self-replicating robots, it was fascinating. It was just a project at the time. But imagine that all over the world, or imagine what we call the universal fabricator, the matter compiler, not the bits compiler, in which everybody has one of those in their garage. And now they don't need to go shopping anymore, because they can have like a 3D printer from the bottom up, print everything they want and create their versions of their products. So a lot of trends in this regard. But one remark I want to make here, which is the trust. Yes, and we discussed about this. I mean, my previous speakers, and of course, I'm very passionate about the data and so on and so forth, and we can touch on that as well. But I can say, and I think I have alluded during my first intervention, that in many areas and aspects, I trust the robot more than I trust the human. A human can get tired, can make errors, and so on and so forth. If I trust how I design a machine to be really benevolent and beneficial to humanity, I think we can achieve a lot of progress. And this is a big, of course, controversial topic. I just wanted to throw it out there, given that we are unleashing to the world these robots nurses right now.
It's a great point to toss out, because while there may not be robotic errors, there could still be human errors in the sense of programming those. But before we get to the robotic errors situation, and
wait until the
trust,
robots are programming themselves. And then that's another level.
I see Tanya's reaction too. I mean, we've all seen bad movies where that doesn't end well, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to paint a very interesting future, which I do want to touch on that word. So future, you're talking about these trends, and you know, we've mentioned a ton of key words, and Ifran looks like he is in the future 20 years from now. But when is some of this actually possible? I mean, the idea of, you know, of automation being a part of this entire process, you know, looking at robotics from a different level. I mean, some of these trends you just mentioned, Mihaela, when are these actually going to come? Even to you, Tanya, in a minute, autonomous vehicles. We've been waiting. And for our audience, let's go deeper into this. We may all have insight, so let's share this. Mihaela, let's start with you. When is some of this stuff actually possible? Those trends that you're mentioning, is it here, like Mohammed said, and got accelerated, or are we still 10, 20 plus years away?
Well, it depends on what particular application you are talking about. So if I may, if you allow me to share my screen, I can just show you something which we are deploying to the world right now. Do I have your permission quickly to
you do.
to do this?
You do.
Thank you
for asking.
so much. Okay, can you see my screen?
I do.
Okay, so in terms of when we are unleashing these applications, they are already unleashed. So we have the MVP, and we are now, you know, there's so much interest, especially in the Middle East. And I'm happy we have Mohammed with us there because he knows, obviously, firsthand. So especially there is so much interest that now we have to accelerate our manufacturing production and deliver these robots. And you can see here, yes, from the screen, what they are doing. So they practically can be very close to the patient without fear of getting infected and so on and so forth, taking these measurements, as well as you know, 24/7 being there whenever the patient needs them. So it is always about, so what this is now about is about, as it was rightfully mentioned, the trust, but also the rapport which a robot can actually create with a patient. And we have done experiments with Sophia, as you may know, with meditation, in which Sophia robot was teaching people to meditate, which is a very intimate experience, probably the ultimate experience. And we got the feedback from people that they got a better experience with Sophia, a more neutral than and zen experience than if a person would have taught them. Because, you know, she could already be there in the Zen zone, while a person has to evolve to be there. And we don't have Buddha in every meditation room. So I think, to your question, they are here, these applications. I will stop sharing my screen. I could speak a lot about this, but
we're going to come back to it. So thank you. And I think you're bringing up a good point. I mean, if anything, we're having to accelerate to these, right? And Mohammed, I see you just unmuted, so I'll come to you.
So I'm glad that we brought this topic, because actually one of the initiatives that the government is doing is building houses for people using 3D technology. So that's really cool. But the interesting thing is we can, yes, use the robotics in healthcare, but we can also use robotics in military equipment. So probably the thing that we need to take care of is how the industry is evolving around which sector, and how do we use that. We have right now the autonomous vehicles that have been used in Dubai as we are speaking right now. So lots of technology that's been used on ground right now. But again, how do we use it? What morality might be brought with such technologies?
Well, and also when at scale, right? There's so much there. There's logic, there's applications or use cases, there's scale. You know, even the definition of robots, right? We've I mean, you could unpack that for days, right? Physical, digital, somewhere in between. There's tons of different robots. But Tanya, I want to come to you. You mentioned 8 and realistically about 10 different topics around deep tech.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack there, and they're all very exciting. But again, we've been talking about these for 10 years and beyond in some cases. Where are we, to both Mahila and Mohammed's point, with some of these being deployed? Or even at some level of scale?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously there's always, being too early. I mean, look, I'm an investor, right? So, we've seen a lot of companies or technology that have come forward that they were just frankly too early, in their life cycle. The world wasn't ready for it. But I really do believe, I mean, now we've got 5G, right? And I think that's a serious key to being able to have this connectivity that these big machines, especially manufacturing, need to have, be able to talk to each other. It's going to really revolutionize what I mentioned earlier. Is where you talked earlier about Industry 4.0. Smart cities, of course. Summitable cars. I mean, I know here in Sweden, Ericsson's got several things going on with autonomous buses and those types of things. I know Volvo, I mean, as you know, Volvo's always been kind of on the forefront. They have a mandate to be fully autonomous in a very short period of time. So, it is here. There's still little bits and pieces that obviously have to be worked out. We talked about I mentioned additive manufacturing earlier. As one of the 9 we look at. I mean, that's obviously 3D printing. I mean, 3D printing, 5 years ago, people are like, raising their hands at it like, well, we can't make money on it, right? Well, it's starting to come forward now, and to the point where I think, you're going to start seeing it even in healthcare, being able to print, if it's organic material or material for medical instruments, for example. I do see that forthcoming now. I'm just trying to think of some of the other areas, obviously, I mean, we talked about 5G and the cloud, big data and analytics. That's just going to increasing as obviously as machine learning and computers get smarter. These algorithms, they just learn and they get smarter as they go. And it is a little scary to think they're going to be programming possibly themselves at some point, where I think we're far off from that. But, it is something, to think about. And to Mohamed's point, the ethical side of all this as well, and the data privacy and all that.
So before we get to data and connectivity, because those are two very big points. And Ifran and I talked about them last week, and I already see Mahila. She's got a point ready to go. And I know Mohammed in the Middle East, I heard what Dubai is doing in general.
Many points.
I know there's a ton of activity too in the Middle East from recent conversations in Dubai, but additive manufacturing. I want to go deeper on this for just 1 second, specifically with you. This is something Europe has huge initiatives on, and again, is just not talked about. What is additive manufacturing and what's happening in Europe? Because this can rival, and I'm bold enough to say this because I have knowledge on all these areas. I am bold enough to say that this could rival some of the growth that Asia, and specifically Southeast Asia, saw in the past 20 years around manufacturing, but no one knows about it. It's never talked about. So what is happening, and why is this so important to the region?
Well, I mean, yeah, so additive manufacturing is technically just, it's 3D, it's the design around 3D printing. It's being able to produce those small components that maybe, were done in a manufacturing process at some point. Saving, if you think about it, if you can do it a little printer this big or whatever, I mean, you're saving, not only time, you're saving resources, you're saving energy. So there's a lot of environmental, I think, positive impacts with this as well. Cost as well. Costs are starting to come down with a lot of the, I'll call feedstock that goes into, the material that has to be used. We invested in a company recently that's desk size and out of Finland. It's a brand new type of 3D printer. And they are being, right now in POCs with several universities, but we really think that their desktop printer will be able to be utilized with the likes of very large manufacturers, and it's desktop. So it's not those big, huge machines, I think, that everybody, used to think about when they thought of 3D printing. But you're already seeing, especially in automotive, I mean, for sure, there's a lot of 3D printed parts that are already, being printed out there, and healthcare as well.
Yeah, but coming back to the question, so it's exactly in that direction. So manufacturing is my thing, so I feel very compelled to clarify this. So when we do manufacturing, usually with, let's say, even with Industry 3.0, we actually are used to do this top down. We have a plan, and we organize production in a plant, and we process each piece, and then we assemble them together. Mm-hmm. Well, with additive manufacturing, we are going exactly the opposite. It's bottom up. And when I mentioned the matter compiler, I meant even bottom up at the cell level, in which I get those materials which are appropriate for each at the cellular level and assemble them from the bottom up, just like an embryon develops into a human being. If I may make this parallel, because this is how I explain it to students. So additive manufacturing means that we go and we add all these bits and pieces in a symbiotic manner, just like biology does when it evolves from the embryo up to the final product. And it is definitely a revolution in manufacturing, but the concept has been invented by the same person who invented the computer. So it is, the information compiler and the matter compiler. That's why I'm saying, because information is crunching bits, zeros and one, and now we are crunching cells and very small pieces from the bottom up. Well, I just thought this is an answer.
I think it's great. If Efren's shaking his head, and Tanya, go for it, Tanya. Sorry.
No. I have nothing else to say. She said it all.
Efren,
this is what enables what Tanya was saying about this miniaturization, because that's why I can have a manufacturing plant in my garage, and I also can choose those sustainable materials to actually produce the cups, and I save the money on the transportation, on all this logistics to transport the cups from China, for example, when I can produce them in my garage. But of course, there's a lot of implications of additive manufacturing. I'm very passionate, obviously, about the topic as well.
Maybe you should have asked her to go first.
I mean, Mihaela, you're passionate about everything. It's amazing. I've never seen someone so passionate about Industrial 4.0. Most people are like, snooze. You are so excited. This is great. But real quick, before we come back, it's true. But before we come back, Efren, you've sat in my corner of you and you haven't had a chance to mention anything. Anything else to add on this before we switch topics here?
Kyle, thanks. First of all, Dr. Mihaela, Tanya, and Mohammed, touched on very, very important points. I'm just going to add one more thing. So one of the institutional funds that I'm part of is called Space Fund. We just made an exit yesterday to a company called Made in Space. Now, Made in Space is essentially doing additive manufacturing in space. So 3D printing in space in zero gravity. So the one thing that I'm going to just add to this is that precision is the key to it. And that's what Dr. Mihaela was talking about. And that's the future. In terms of what Tanya just mentioned, in terms of that, technology being too early. Yes, we have seen that, when it comes to, earlier technologies, like whether it's the intranet, whether it's General Magic coming up with the smartphones way early. But, what the pandemic have shown us that it's not about the world being ready. It's just, things can happen right now and we have to be prepared. So, we have had development of technologies and it's been happening. And when you say that, is this happening? It is happening. So as I told you, it might seem like, out there to think like, right now we're thinking of manufacturing up in space, but it's a very important area for us to think about. And they're building solar arrays for the next steps of what we are trying to do in space. So in space, as you may know, the ISS is having, new commercial dockets where, the companies which are taking, and in fact, as we are touching base on that, UAE Space Agency are going to be sending their commercial astronauts going up in the ISS. So, it's an important area. Another sector that, robotics has implication is agriculture. And, one thing that, something that we need to touch on, because it's not a fancy topic, but it is a topic that requires a lot of attention because it is global food security that we are talking about. Yeah, so I'll pause right there, but yeah, I love what Dr. Mihaela and Tanya and Mohammed had to say.
So let's unpack it. I saw heads shaking. Let's go for it. I mean, I want to talk about smart cities because I think there's a lot there, but let's start with the agriculture. I mean, playing a role with robotics, again, most is not talked about. Robotics, industrial, or just general IIoT, so industrial Internet of Things. This is game-changing, or will be game-changing, along with data in what the future of agriculture looks like. So Ifran, we're going to start with you. You brought it up. Unpack this. What does this look like? What does this new world of agriculture look like as the idea of robotics is being implemented? The industry is changing and shifting towards a more connected future, playing into everything we've just talked about.
Right. Thanks, Kyle. So for starters, and I always think that agriculture is the root of, the change or movement of industrialization. It was at the back of what we have today. Mechanized, agriculture was there. Today, we can talk about, automated agriculture, right? Because at the end of the day, we are having more and more urban population globally. Agriculture is not a fancy thing that a lot of people prefer to go into, even if your family has been in that business for a long time. So we need to look at, things, in that sector in terms of that's going to increase productivity and yield, right? So, and that's being utilized, right? So when you look at, in different countries, where, even implication of some of these newer technologies. So we talked about IoT before. IoT has, several layers of, implication, but also, so one of the shifts that we will see in this sector is massively in the production level and crop growing level usage of robotics. So as we have seen in the industrial side, using manufacturing robots as well as assembly robots, there are new robots that's been constructed every day that's going to help us in the agricultural sector. So one of these companies, I'm sure you are familiar with them, it's a Swiss company called Catalyst, has been very active across in developing countries where, agriculture is actually the bread and butter for that, to trying to implement newer technologies into that space. Blockchain, as we speak, has a major application. And the reason this is very near and dear to me, I've been writing tons of paper on that particular field. As my origin, I'm from Bangladesh, and is a country which depends heavily on agricultural production. And today, that numbers are changing, and we obviously need to change that back over the course of time in order for us to have a global food security. So, I'll pause right there, but all of them are large topics to get into. I'm sure, Dr. Mihaela, has a few pointers, and Tanya and Mohammed also. So I'll wait for them to open those topics up.
Mohammed, I saw you shaking your head throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
We'd love to start. I mean, there you go. Go.
Yeah, I mean, true, very true. I mean, other than food security, I don't know what kind of audience do we have, but guys, I mean, focus on data. Throughout the years, I've seen that those companies and those even people who focus on collecting data are more, I would say, successful into the turning point into the 4.0, and also taking the I would say the attention of the investors. It's true being said that data is the new oil. I would say, however, that we might ask right now, in terms of wealth, how much this bank account has, I think in the future we would be having the normal of saying how much data is in your server. So that's because people right now, especially even in the pandemic, investors, VCs are looking for opportunities to invest in those companies that have tons of billions of data and probably trillions of data, which they might use into the transition into the 4.0. We've seen governments changing, economies of course will be different 50 years from now, even 20 years from now. That shift is very important to think about right now as individuals, as a company, as industry leaders, as well as investors, because hey, you don't want to invest your money in something that will not be growing 10 years from now.
I'm not sure who to call in next. Both Tanya and Mahila look like they're ready to go. So Mahila, we'll come to you first, and we'll come to Tanya. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and I totally agree with what Irfan and Mohammed were mentioning with regard to let's say the 4.0 agriculture, if we are to stay with the topic. So sustainable agriculture is, of course, number one, and how we achieve that with the convergence of technologies by bringing in the sensors to tell us when the soil has the right composition for the right plant, to tell us also when the plant needs water from that soil and how much water. So this precision, which Irfan was mentioning, is achieved through the convergence of technologies. We have drones which can, see and also spread these insect repellents on the soil, and also those will be now sustainable and will not harm us. But one interesting trend, which I think merges what was mentioned here, at least alluded to in smart city and then agriculture, which you mentioned before asking us and focusing us on agriculture, is that I'm working with Singapore. I've been advising them on science and technology for many years. And they created this Fusionopolis, which is a new, I actually worked on the blueprint of Fusionopolis, which is their main research center, a city within a city. But one big trend there is so-called vertical agriculture, in which you have agriculture in buildings, and also on the walls of the buildings, you are growing plants like that. And not with normal soil, because they have a big issue with that. Yes, so they don't have enough terrain and the right soil either. But they are creating now synthetic soil, and that is a new component. Yes, again, coming to the revolution in agriculture, which is probably beyond our head. And of course, as well as with robotics, all that monitoring, all those vertical agricultures, plants, maybe we can call them, monitored by robots and so on and so forth.
Tanya, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, so I mean, given where we are up here in the Nordics, I mean, we only have a short growing period. So a lot of it is, done indoors. We haven't actually invested in any, I'll call agricultural technology companies yet. Doesn't mean we don't want to, but we do see a lot of companies that are kind of tackling what Michaela mentioned with regards to the sensor data, which you see in the soils. We see a lot of vertical farming technologies and robotic manufacturing. I'll call it robotic manufacturing, vertical farming here. We see a lot of that because, again, we only have a short growing season. So for us to be able to produce the type of food that we need, we do import a lot, but at the same time, they've gotten very creative here and be able to come up with a lot of very new technologies. There's also, we haven't touched upon it, but also aquaculture. So in Norway, as you probably know, Norway's well known for their salmon production, and they have come up with a tremendous amount of different technologies to be able to farm, in a better fashion, not only to produce more, but also to be environmentally friendly, of course, with it being fish. So, there are those types of technologies that are being built here too. And I think with the growing, the population that we have, obviously, and also now with COVID, the logistics of getting this food from places. I mean, we weren't getting food, for example, from Italy or Spain for a while during the COVID crisis. So where was it coming from? They had to improvise in the logistics chain. So do you need to be more local, if you will, and come up with ways to be able to create, the food that needs to be grown in a more local, and that goes actually to one of our investments. It's a company that has a indoor refrigerator. Basically, it looks like an indoor refrigerator, but it's very high end, and you use little pods to grow your own herbs and lettuces. And it's a very cool company, and it's a smart refrigerator. So it's a company called Natufia, and basically they call themselves the Nespresso, of the herbs and the lettuces, of course, of the world. So it's a very cool company. You can put one in your own home, or you could have one in a restaurant, for capabilities of that. But I think people are also going to see those types of technologies coming home too. When I say becoming more local, was my point.
I think Ifran might actually have one. Based on his background right now, he actually might have a smart refrigerator back there, somewhere amongst the green lighting. But you're right, and you all bring up good points. And again, a common topic today, or this last round, was data. So all of these products are generating some type of data. Security, privacy is one concern, but second is, what do you do with the data? And third, when all this data has been aggregated, how is it getting from one place to another, right? We deploy sensors throughout a farm. Great. We know soil temperature. What does that mean? How does that soil temperature data get back to, say, a tractor or some type of machinery to then react? And then back to Tanya's point, be automated. Where are we in this type of process? I mean, data is great, and to Mohammed, it is the new oil, great. And we're going to look at companies as it's a bank account, and how much data do you have? But what can you do with this data? How are we controlling or thinking about privacy in this next era? Because if data is everything, there's got to be some connection points around this. So, Ifran, go for it.
Yeah.
You're the first to unmute. It's like a game show here. You're the first to go.
Thanks, Kyle. And it's a very interesting topic that you put up. But at first, before I go, Tanya was talking about something, the smart refrigerator, and I just remember, because I think it's relevant because it's pandemic, and in the Nordic countries, I'm sure some of you are aware about this. In Svalbard, they have this, they are actually preserving our species, specifically the plants, for some time, and robotics have been in use for over a decade in places like that. So our the future of our world also depends on those keeping places like that. But that being said, it's a very interesting topic that you mentioned in terms of data, and I'll pick up from something that Mohammed mentioned earlier, is that some industries have been using robotics and data for some time, and some industries are still to adopt. So I'll pick up from the energy industry, in fact, the mineral industry, right? So the oil and gas industry. So the oil and gas industries, and Mohammed can tell even more on this, is that there were data, but a lot of them were not digital, right? So in terms of a lot of aspects where robotics has been used, there is a company called Expansive, which is also co-invested by BP Ventures, essentially utilizes blockchain technology to manage data. And so what could this data mean? So today, as we know, we trade oil in different standards, right? So we have the Brent, we have the heavy. So When you look into the petrochemical component, the carbon components inside the oil determines the value of the oil. So and also in terms of the oil and gas industries, there are usually a lot of leakages that are involved in the process of extraction and the refinery processes. So today, companies like that utilizes both machine as well as data to give you not only the knowledge in terms of how valuable your commodity is, but also creating new avenues of creating new trading platform for people to trade this commodity in different modes than before. So so data again, it's not only the new oil, it gives us inferences on things and interpretation on things that has been there for some time, for us to better understand, manage, and effectively utilize and create new economy out of it. Because today with this data, commodities, which has been very complex before, we're able to trade in a lot of different manners. So I'll just pause right there, but happy to dive more from rest of the speaker, and if Mohammed has anything to add to that.
You're all so polite. It's everyone's so polite. I love it. Economies is a key word. We haven't brought that up since we've begun this. We haven't talked about how people are going to profit off of this in some way, shape, or form, right? How this is going to drive new economies in different ways. Mohammed, I saw you on mute, so I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, all right, thank you. So, well, I think in general, the platforms, especially social media platforms, have added a lot immensely to this transition into data usage, as well as the connection between and connectivity between the world and between the people. And I think we might see democratization of data, if you will. And data might not be as private as we thought of it 15 years ago. Probably I would say prior to Facebook, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I think people would be able to share some of their data with others. And being confident and being I would say sending this data to someone who they can trust, and the sharing of data will not be as harmful as it was in 2017 and 2018, which generated some policies in Europe and thereafter in Canada and the US.
And if I may take on from here, obviously, because data for artificial intelligence, data is our oil, of course, and our bread and butter. So, of course, I'm very passionate about that. And because I mentioned the World Economic Forum, I am actually a member of the Data-Driven Development Council. And we, grappled with this issue, with the data is the new oil and who actually is profiting from that. And we concluded that, yes, so the platform cartels, speaking of the industry 3.0, are the ones who are mainly profiting from our data. So now the trend is to move from data is the new oil and fulfill what Mohammed is saying, that dream in which I actually am. I have sovereignty over my data, and I can choose with who to share. And then, in exchange for certain services, for example, if I participate in a clinical trial for COVID right now, with my data, I will have priority to get the treatment, over others who don't. So, we can use data as incentives in many ways, but also reward people for their data. And therefore, it's becoming more of data as currency. Then data is the new oil. And here it is where what Irfan was mentioning about blockchain plays a very important role, because that's how we manage it. And we at SingularityNet are building own a distributed platform, especially to fulfill this dream. So it is a blockchain-based platform where, you know, our community of the best scientists in the world are putting their algorithms there. But they do that not only to be rewarded automatically via payments on blockchain whenever the algorithm runs, but also to be able to use the data from those, let's call them donors, and to benefit those from, you know, from the algorithm crunching, let's say, an answer to their question. And this is all enabled by so-called tokenization. Anyway, that's maybe a different conversation. I don't want to go too deep into that. But I just wanted to underline this very important trend in which now we will get that power, and Mohammed's dream will be fulfilled sooner rather than later.
And Tanya, to kick off the next part of that conversation is, we've talked about all this and now this new economy or new ways of empowering ourselves with data. Connectivity. You mentioned 5G. On last episode that Efren and I did, we talked about 5G actually being skipped over in some cases, going on to 6G. So with everything we've talked about, what does the future of connectivity look like, and how does it play a role in this? Because it does matter.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, you know, with the onslaught of 5G now, I mean, obviously with Ericsson and Nokia, you know, it's been in development under these secret phases for a very long time. But you know, and there's been obviously proponents for it, and then ones that are not proponents of it. I mean, we've seen a lot of things in the news lately about the COVID crisis and 5G and, you know, those types of things. But, you know, ultimately, you know, being skipped over, I mean, I think, you know, it took a long time to get from 4G to 5G. So I really don't know how much, you know, I'm not behind the curtain, of course, when it comes to those things. So it's hard for me to say, but I assume they're probably already working on it. You know, but it's going to take a while. But you know, getting to the point, as you mentioned earlier about the connectivity with the, you know, this is really going to allow those larger machines to really start to talk to each other. The sense of data that we were talking about, right? Really be able to propel that next level of the machines, whatever type of machine it is, to be able to talk to each other. You know, in my example earlier with the company out of Norway called Intellisea that does the predictive maintenance, for example, 5G is absolutely going to increase the speed and efficiency and the productivity of those process manufacturers, for example, that they service. Because they're going to get the data quicker, it's going to be analyzed quicker, and obviously, you know, they're on and they're out. You know, I don't know if you wanted me to comment at all about data in general, but you know, you know, we have GDPR here, of course, and it's, you know, it kind of took companies here by storm. It was kind of like, you know, that Y2 you know, compliant thing that we had in the US many years ago. And, you know, we have to be very careful here. You know, and companies have their own data, it's on their servers. So security is very, very important. You know, and they house their own data. You know, a lot of the service providers, like the company I mentioned in Norway, you know, they don't own that data, but they can certainly use that data if to analyze within each company. So, you know, and we have to be very, very super important, you know, important in every company that we invest in has to be super careful about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have an act here in California, even more specific to what's happening in the US and then in other countries as well. So data privacy is just becoming a further issue. And to kind of touch on a point Mohammed mentioned is that there could be collaboration in the future with data. And when we look at the ideas of smart cities, because that's been talked about here, I want to start a little bit of a controversy here, because is that really going to happen? When you have a connected city or an intelligent city, so from your industry to your residents to your streets to everything in between, will data really be shared? Will data really be open? And what does that smart city, how intelligent will it really be? And how will we all play in that? Because in my mind, we've talked about smart cities. And again, I've been very fortunate, similar to you, to work with governments and invest in some of these companies as well. And smart cities is a great term to use, but smart intelligent cities is not really happening at scale. It's in pieces, which is fine. Technology is catching up. But the openness of data, we have been very misled on. Certain governments and certain pieces of cities open up their data points, but it's historical data or it's small little blips. So when we talk about a smart and intelligent city, what's going to make it smart? When is that data, or how will that data actually be shared collaboratively or not? So Mohammed, I'm gonna start with you. You brought it up, so I'm gonna start with you. And I know you're doing this stuff in Dubai. I saw that Dubai has a ton of smart city projects, even in Abu Dhabi, throughout the region.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, not just but if you guys have heard of Neom, which is in the northwest of Saudi, where it's a mega city, and it's a giga project actually, where tons of people are working right now in order to build the new city. Nothing which of course we haven't seen, especially here in Saudi. So that's really different even for the people here. But I mean, right now we are, I believe, experiencing a kind of global civilization, which might be seen in actualization in probably 2050. We have right now one language at least. Right now we are talking to each other in one language, one currency probably with the blockchain. The shared economy started with Uber, and also one city, or I would say one family with Facebook. So back to what we've mentioned or talked about earlier, that we might be owning our data and then share the data with whomever we trust. I think we are on that track right now. I believe some websites, if you want to register there, you would be asked if you want to register by your Google account or your Facebook account, and they might get some data from your Facebook from your Google Drive and so on and so forth. So we are going into that direction. However, how would that look like in 2050? I don't know. I can't anticipate. I can't expect right now.
Mahila, I didn't see you reach for the unmute button, but I feel like you have some points on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because he mentioned Uber, obviously, and I am very passionate about that as well, but in a different way in this case, because at the time when Uber was unleashed, actually we did not have the technologies that are enabling us to actually have this sovereignty over our data. So we did not have the blockchain. So I have an article which I will share probably with you, and you can post it on Uberization demystified, which is, it's not only about sharing our data, but it's also about sharing in an unethical way on these open platforms, in which I don't have any power or say over how it is used and so on and so forth, and I cannot even track that. And many other companies are now working on decentralizing that and empowering the individuals with their data through the blockchain technology, which is now, one of the fourth industrial revolutions technologies. And of course, this spills into your larger question with the smart city, because all the other platforms, as Tanya mentioned, are now under scrutiny. And it's not only in Europe or in California, which I definitely salute about that, but at the World Economic Forum, we have started a movement which is called the Presidio Principles for how we, actually how companies are using data. And the signatories, are big companies as well as startups, in which we are creating this movement to use data in an ethical manner, especially now when the importance of data is so big when it comes to smart city. There are a few considerations which I want to make here, and that is, when it comes to data, it's not only people data now, it will be also the cars and the robots in a smart city. So the fourth industrial revolution is now bringing it all together into what I call socio-technical combinatorics. How do we combine that, and actually where does the liability lay is another very big issue. So if the robot misbehaves and goes into a zone when it doesn't have permission, how do I, punish that? Or when the car has an accident, the autonomous car. So there are many issues to be solved, and they are being solved with concepts like legal personality and so on and so forth, which we are now developing in conjunction with the robots and these autonomous things with which we are starting to coexist in the smart city. Thank you.
Tanya.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've seen quite a few smart cities try to spur up, especially up here in the Nordics. We seem to be first movers up here. And I think up until the whole GDPR thing, it was very actually easy to find information about other people. It's always been that way here. Obviously, with a smart city, you need, in my opinion, you need to have like a centralization. Somebody's actually, putting this together, because you have infrastructure, you have roads, you have traffic signals, you have, everything that water, purified water, even food and logistics, and how do you even begin to centralize that and put it into, one unit? I'm certainly not smart enough to do that. And, I know there's a lot of components, but I think one of your original maybe questions was, is this happening now, or is it happening in pieces? I think it's kind of happening in bits and pieces. I think we'll get there eventually. There is you're familiar, I'm sure, with Techstars. They have a smart city accelerator in Amsterdam. I happen to be a mentor for it. My ex-partner actually is the managing director there. So I'm quite up and up on what they're trying to do there. And it's powered by a company called Arcadis. But that, a company like Arcadis might be that kind of central unit that we're all kind of looking for, and being the piece, the person that puts it together in pieces.
Yes, exactly. But one thing, exactly what you say, but it is centralized in a decentralized way. Yeah. And what I mean by this is, and that's a very important, kind of spice, if I may, because, for example, Aecon is also setting up a smart city, and I am kind of advising in that. But the central element here is he is setting up this smart city around his coin, the A coin, and the coin enables this decentralized flux of data into the pods which are necessary, the bits and pieces which are starting now to be revealed. So yes, thank you so much for all what you presented there.
Absolutely. So we're about at that point in the show where I want to switch gears to some additional topics. To make sure we get this in, is we're all investors, and we look at these industries probably very similarly, but probably very differently in some cases, just based on our experiences. So as investors, how are you looking at some of these industries we've spoken about, whether that be Industrial 4.0 as a whole? Some of the areas, Tanya, you mentioned that you guys are very specific on, focused on, pardon me. How are you as investors looking at these spaces? How are you thinking about diligence as well, right? And this is both for our investor audience and for our entrepreneur audience, as it's a full case study for them to really understand. So Ifran, let's start with you. As an investor, how are you looking at these industries? What are you picking apart on that diligence process, maybe now more than you were before?
Thanks, Kyle. So it's a very interesting point. And so for starters, the first thing that I always look into is that making sure, the tagline or the technology name is not abused in terms of, in the industry itself. And because at the end of the day, we're looking at macro level problems, and when we look at each of these macro level problems, we're looking at utilizing a very specific technology to solve that problem. So Dr. Mihaela mentioned blockchain. I'm sure all of us who's been in this field are familiar with that. Of course, there are tremendous application of blockchain, but there's also has been tremendous amount of abuse that's been used, but with the name of blockchain, where a lot of them you didn't really need blockchain for that. So so the point, so for me, the way I see it, because I'm involved in the early stages of the development of these companies, both hands-on as well as through investment. So I look at as Dr. Mihaela always mentioned, in the singularity component, and how these technology combines together, and how these portfolios each connect with each other to solve a greater problem. So in this case, for me, I'm heavily involved in the energy sector, where we're trying to power some of these devices and the technology with some new innovation in that space. Going maybe a little bit beyond, maybe in the outer space, where you can do 3D printing in zero gravity, but at the same time, agriculture, which is at the root of everything, right? So to making sure like food and security, those are sectors that I essentially look at and like to get involved in.
Mohammed, same question to you. How are you looking at these technologies and again, diligence from an investor perspective?
All right, so well, from my experience, I would say that I've seen a couple of companies that haven't developed the thinking or the mindset of making sure that something clicks with the people, right? Something that people are willing to pay for. And that's different for different, I would say, level of companies, right? So at some level, your product or your service might work for certain people, but if you do not innovate and if you do not pivot, you will be losing that I would say the fire that drives people to buy and put their money into your product. And especially during this pandemic, pivoting is inevitable. I mean, you have to, otherwise you might lose people that believe in your product or service, or you might even lose the morale of your employees. Guess what? After the pandemic, I believe you might even recruit new people. So thinking about that, because from the investor point of view and perspective, they want to see something agile. They want to see something robust as well, and they want to see something lucrative, and they will be smiling after seeing that.
Mihaela.
Absolutely. So I can definitely take on from here and underline once again that indeed COVID-19 has accelerated the appetite for high-tech investment. Definitely. I can tell you, because I'm only advising such companies and we are pulled by investors. Usually we were used to run after them. So it is amazing. And if I am again allowed to share my screen just for one extra second, I just wanted to show
You've broken all my rules. You've broken all my rules today. The rule breaker.
So just 1 second, can you see it? I just wanted to show the strategy for investment, and this is what we follow right now, which I think will be pretty good for everyone to understand what I'm talking about here. So of course this is about our own investments, which is now related to the work on COVID-19 and new treatments and so on and so forth, which builds on our healthcare portfolio. So the idea is to have a diversified portfolio of companies, but not only drug development. This applies in general these days. And these early founder level investment phases. and to focus on areas of indications with highly unmet needs, which is now with COVID-19, it's clear that it's coming up. When you see Tesla changing their production to produce masks, for example, yeah. So the needs are there. There are so many needs, and as Mohammed was saying, it's in how quick you reconfigure. So the small will beat fast now. Small will be big because small is faster and big is slower. So therefore, it's a time for the startups which are bringing these technologies, and they can reconfigure quickly and take advantage of these new commercialization opportunities. And of course, all this operational excellence based and all these indicators, which I'm sure that Tanya can speak to much better than me. Thank you so much. I will stop sharing, and I will stop misbehaving from now.
That's all right. It's all right. It's made for a great conversation, so you're fine. I appreciate it though. But Tanya, look, I'm going to call it out. You guys are a powerhouse. You've been investing in deep tech. You've got a portfolio of over 80 companies, almost $1 billion in under management at this point around all of these companies. You got 9 categories and growing. How the hell are you looking at this industry? That's a lot to look at. So as an investor, as a partner, I mean, how do you look at all this?
Well, I mean, our core has always been addressing the world's biggest challenges. So investing in technologies that do that. And it comes down to, if you look at our focus areas, it's hardware, software, and science. And it doesn't have to include all 3, but at least 2. And AI, of course, neatly fits in most of those, except for pure hardware, of course. It's interesting because we're a very early stage investor, as I mentioned to you, and we look at technology in general, and then we look at the market and we look at the team. And those are the 3 things when you invest at a very early stage that you have to kind of be sure of, because that's all you've got. Typically, sometimes these are technologies that are coming out of a university, for example, maybe 1 person, it may be 3 people if we're lucky. So a lot of times we have to really rely on and really talk to who we know in our network that can help us verify that there may be a market for this technology out there. And so we have a pretty vast network when it comes to corporates, for example, to understanding what their needs are. So we can always tap into that even before perhaps we make the commitment to make an investment. But again, it is a growing area, and we keep getting new buzzwords all the time. And it's industry to us. It's the technology solving a problem, a world problem, challenge. But the industry, it's really agnostic, because it could be for agricultural, it could be for manufacturing, but there may be actually some component that could or technology could be used for both. So we have to try to keep an open mind about that.
Absolutely, and that takes me to one of my last questions, because I have a fun one for the very last one. But closing thoughts. We've talked about a lot today. We're sitting on all sides. We're all investors. We've also played the role of entrepreneur. We educate and empower those that are building in this space. But let's take a moment and kind of recap. And I would love to hear your closing thoughts on where things are going in the coming future, as those in our audience as investors and entrepreneurs can prepare themselves or ready themselves for what's to come. So Mohammed, I'd like to start with you. Closing thoughts as to what you see coming here in the future.
Well, thank you. Well, I think I would put it in a nutshell as don't put your eggs in one basket as an investor or as a company or owner / entrepreneur, because during the first decade of this century, we've had the financial collapse in around 2008. Right now, banks are doing fine, but other sectors are getting the damage of this all, which is probably the tourism sector. So As investors, again, as also company owners, try to diversify your, I would say, target audience, target demography, and try to get also different funds from different investors, because hey, some investors do make the same mistakes also, and focusing only on one sector, which we've seen in the past 2-3 months. They've struggled, as well as the companies that they have invested in. So this is my thought regarding the closing statement.
Perfect. Ifran.
Thanks. So, just out of relevance for this topic right now, I just wanted to give a shout out to some of the companies that has been very active during the time of pandemic. And essentially, they've been told some of them are like the front line, fighters. So there's a company called Spot, which is from Boston Dynamics. It's basically using robots to control social distancing in Singapore. There's a company called Wiz, which is also utilizing robots for sterilization and to clean streets in Hong Kong. And there's many others. One point that I would always say in terms of what the situation have shown us is that we as investor, we play a role also. Apart from doing diligence, signing and writing checks. We play a part in terms of envisioning what the future would look like and how that future would be applicable, right? So we have several diversified portfolios. It is for us to connect the dots to make sure, and what Dr. Mihaela always mentioned, singularity, because at the end of the day, we are trying to make our world better, our lives better, and of course, whenever it comes to the topic of robots, since I'm involved in places where in space, in deep tech, I'm always asked this question: is that are we going to have the Terminator situation, Skynet taking over the world? But it's a different. I think Hollywood kind of played a big part in influencing the way we think. But robots are actually not bad. I remember Jack Ma mentioned a very important point during the World Economic Forum, where he mentioned that teach your kids and our future generation things that robots cannot do. So robots are not a problem. It's just it will enable us to repurpose what we are doing right now. So redundant things that we are doing right now, we can leave that to the robots because they're more efficient, more precise, and they can get things done better. On the other hand, we as human beings could do something else that will propel us to the next generation of evolution of our technology. So when you mention industry 4.0, 5.0, humans will have a different factor. So it's nobody replacing the other. So we have to understand that. And that's only then, we can accelerate the process, because it is important for us. And the pandemic has shown that we need technologies like that, and being prepared for it, for any other, situations that we as the civilization may encounter. So I'll pause right there. And thanks everyone.
Couldn't agree. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Tanya, closing thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. So, I think my co-panelists here have said some amazing things, and it's been an honor, by the way, to be on the panel with everybody here. So, something Mohammed said, diversity is really good. Don't put your eggs in one basket. When I was an investment banker, that was an asset manager. That was like one of the biggest things we learned. And I couldn't agree more, even as an investor myself, but also for our companies and other founders that are out there. If there's anything, I've been through a couple financial crises now, and that's absolutely very, very good, something good to follow. So, always bring value-added investors. These are for obviously the founders out there. Bring value-added investors to the table for you, people that understand your technology, people that can get you to that next level, who can help you strategize, and those types of things. The sectors I think that are kind of going to be coming forward, we've talked about them all. Industry 4.0, healthcare, I think, is a huge one. I think there's a lot to do in healthcare. Logistics, I think, are going to completely be revamped after this entire situation we're going through today. Autonomy, everything. So, I think that's also an area to watch. And then all kind of goes back to some of the deep tech, things that we've been and themes we've been talking about today. So, I think getting back to VC basics, investment for both purpose and profit, I think is what, as a VC, that's why it was started. And that's why I got into the business. And I think this is the time now, to kind of get back, as everybody has kind of said here today, to help the world. Let's make it a better place.
Absolutely. Mahila, closing thoughts.
Yes. So, this COVID-19 crisis gave us, and to me at least, I speak for myself, time for reflection and also to, reconsider a lot of things about the world and about myself and so on and so forth. So, one thought I'd like to leave you always is this exponential effects, which we are witnessing now with COVID-19, and we have lived it, as well as we're talking about them here in the context of technology. So they bring even more to the fore the need for impact investing and aware investing. And so investing in the future sustainable world. So be it through smart city, through, so the applications to be more important than anything else. So as a technologist, obviously, I've been always romancing with technology forever. But we technologists sometimes do not really think about, what is progress. So progress means going forward, but which is the direction? That is the critical thing now, and the critical spice which we have to bring to our work right now. The direction should be towards a more sustainable world, because the COVID-19 we will conquer once we have a vaccine, but the climate change, when we get to that tipping point of no return, nothing can be done, and we will find ourselves immersed in that reality, then it will be too late. So I would use this sort of awakening, which we have got now, in guiding our investments. Thank you.
I love it, guys. Absolutely wonderful closing thoughts. And thank you so much for all of the insights shared today. I know, for being in this industry for so long, I have a ton of notes that I'm going to walk away with. So I know our audience for sure has even more as well. So thank you again for your time today and all that you shared. Real quick, where can everyone find you? And my fun question, because it was brought up 5 different times, is your prediction of when singularity will happen. Right now, I think it's 2045 is what I looked up, but your prediction on when this will actually happen. So where can everyone find you online? And then toss out a year that you predict singularity is going to happen. We won't hold you to it. It's just kind of fun. Mine, by the way, I'm going to say 2030. Actually, 2032. I'll go a crazy number. I won't go too even. 2032. All right. Ifran, where can everyone find you and your singularity prediction?
I can be reached over at info@sheikhmohammedirfan.com. And, I think singularity is already here. You just have to wait till the reality to come through. So
the Terminator is already out there. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. Tanya, where can everyone find you and your singularity prediction?
So it's butterfly.vc, and Tanya at butterfly.vc. And I kind of agree with Ephraim. I think it's kind of already here, but maybe within the next 10 years.
All right. We're not only a singularity here, we're already living in the matrix. Everyone get ready, prepare yourself. Mohammed, where can everyone find you in your prediction?
Yeah, all right. So LinkedIn, probably the fastest, Mohammed Al-Majid. And singularity, probably year 2030, I guess.
Oh, all right. Mahila, close us out. Where can everyone find you in your prediction?
Yes, so you can find me, of course, by putting my name in LinkedIn. I agree with Mohammed. That's the fastest way. And then we can take it from there and set up a call. I get those kind of calls very often now, and I love it because we cannot travel. Yeah? So until my robot avatar will be able to travel on my behalf, until I get a vaccine, I cannot travel. So being an advisor to SingularityNet, which is actually working on the singularity problem, I don't want to say that I know, but I have quite big confidence to say that we will reach higher intelligence than human intelligence by 2029. So, you know, Irfan was not that far and you were not that far either. But because you mentioned 2045, that's when we will reach the super intelligences. That means that intelligence which will be able to code and recreate and reproduce itself and also make a novel kind of discovery every 5 minutes. So I think it is imperative that we befriend these intelligences until then and train them to be loving and benevolent to the human race. Because if we are going to train them to spy, kill, sell, and so on and so forth, as we are doing today, as Mohammed was mentioning with the defense applications, and I was mentioning with the platform cartels, I think humanity will not be in a very good position in 2045. But it's good to be aware and awakened to that. And our goal is to design those beneficial, benevolent singularities.
And make the world a better place, to Tanya and all of our points as well. So again, all four of you, thank you so very much for your time. I know it's hard to coordinate all of our schedules, so thank you from joining us from around the world. And
Pleasure.
thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. And thank you to our audience for joining in today. I hope if you didn't walk away with something, rewatch this episode, because there is a ton of good education throughout this entire episode today. And also a big shout out to Elena, to the entire LA Token team for bringing us all together. If you liked today's episode, thumbs up. You can do it twice if you want. Click the subscribe button. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host for VCTV, and we'll be back here tomorrow for another edition. And you can find all of us on LinkedIn, and I'll share some of the articles that were mentioned as well later. So everyone have a great day. Kyle signing off.